there? Okay. All right, this is lesson 15 in Ecclesiastes, Flies in the Ointment, I've called it. We'll be reading Ecclesiastes 9:18, the last verse of chapter 9, and then 10, 1 through 20. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. As dead flies give perfume a bad smell, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. The heart of the wise inclines to the right, but the heart of the fool to the left. Even as fools walk along the road, they lack sense and show everyone how stupid they are. If a ruler's anger rises against you, do not leave your post. Calmness can lay great offenses to rest. There is an evil I have seen under the sun, the sort of evil that arises from a ruler. Fools are put in many high positions, while the rich occupy the low ones. I have seen slaves on horseback, while princes go on foot like slaves. Whoever digs a pit may fall into it. Whoever breaks through a wall may be bitten by a snake. Whoever quarries stone may be injured by them. Whoever splits logs may be endangered by them. If the axe is dull and its edge unsharpened, more strength is needed, but skill will bring success. If a snake bites before it is charmed, the charmer receives no fee. Words from the mouth of the wise are gracious, but fools are consumed by their own lips. At the beginning, their words are folly. At the end, they are wicked madness, and fools multiply words. No one knows what is coming. Who can tell someone else what will happen after them? The toil of fools wearies them. They do not know the way to town. Woe to the land whose king was a servant and whose princes feast in the morning. Blessed is the land whose king is of noble birth and whose princes eat at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. Through laziness, the rafters sag. Because of idle hands, the house leaks. A feast is made for laughter, wine makes life merry, and money is the answer for everything. Do not revile the king even in your thoughts, or curse the rich in your bedroom, because a bird in the sky may carry your words, and a bird on the wing may report what you say. This was actually one of the hardest lessons for me to pull together, because I felt like somebody just took a bucket of fortune cookies, crumbled them up, dumped them down, and said, "Here, teach a lesson on this." But as I studied it, I got a little better grip from reading other commentaries, and some people see more of a rhyme or reason here, and I'm going to go with that. A fly in the ointment. I think we all kind of have a general sense of what that means. It's an imperfection in something that detracts from it or ruins it. There's something positive, but has this little defect that just wrecks the whole thing. And life has a lot of flies in the ointment, doesn't it? Things that are supposed to be great and wonderful, and that would be, except for this one little thing. So, for example, think about you're in high school, you're going to the prom, you have the perfect dress, you got the perfect shoes, you're getting your hair done, your nails done, it's going to be great, and then the morning of, you get a big pimple right here. That's the fly in the ointment. Or you go to a movie that you really wanted to see, and you're on a date, but you're really into this movie, and the person behind you talks through the whole thing. And it's just like, my husband had an experience that kind of fits here. He, when he was active duty on post, he would teach residents, and every year when the class graduated, he has to dress up and go sit up on the stage with everybody else, and it's a really big deal. And I love it when he gets dressed up. I just think he looks really handsome in his uniform, but he hates it because he calls it his monkey suit, and he feels ridiculous. But anyway, he's all dressed up, he's ready to go in, and you know how hot it gets here in the summer. He's walking across the parking lot to go in and, process up and take his place. And the sole of his shoe sticks to the pavement, and when he pulls it up, the sole comes off. He's on the way in, what do you do? Well, he somehow managed to duct tape it on, but the whole time he's sitting there with his foot down, just kind of thinking about that. So life is full of these things, flies in the ointment. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they are not funny. But just these little things that just make life harder, or they disappoint our expectations. And sometimes they can be avoided and sometimes they can't. Well, Solomon starts out here with, I think, a bit of general advice about wisdom. He has just said wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. As dead fly gives perfume, a bad smell, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. He said wisdom is the best thing we have down here. It is the best life skill. If you can choose anything, choose wisdom, but even wise people get tripped up. So the first thing in this, the first two verses is wisdom about how to guard your reputation. Dead flies and perfume. So it's, perfume in the old days, as we've said before, was a very wonderful thing, highly prized. Rich people were the ones that could wear it. And so when people smelled that, it was just like, it's kind of like their reputation goes before them and lingers around them. And wow, people are impressed. But Solomon is saying here, even a little bit of foolishness can take the reputation of a very otherwise good and wise person who's highly respected, and one little bit of that ruins it all. Like a fly in the perfume. A little folly ruins a lot of good. And it seems like the better your reputation is, the more harm is done when you fall. Folly doesn't just neutralize all the accumulated wisdom and honor of your life. It produces the opposite. You don't go back to zero and start over with no brownie points. All your merits, all your good things are erased in the people's minds, and now you have demerits, deficits, debts, that you're going to have a hard time climbing back out of that hole. Instead of a good smell, you're emanating a bad smell. When your folly is revealed, people don't simply forget about you, they think badly of you. So Solomon's saying, be careful of your reputation. Don't do something stupid. And I think we can all think of, say, a good man who, did good things, had a good reputation, generally was wise, and he was taken down by a seductive woman. One indiscretion ruins it all. Or a financial indiscretion, just a little thing that at the time you think, oh, it's not going to be a big deal, nobody's going to know, it doesn't matter. Well, try to run for public office, it will come out. So your reputation is something that, even as a wise person, you need to be careful, because we are all capable of falling. Wise men are capable of falling. Look at the life of Solomon himself, the wisest man on earth, and what does he do? He falls for women that wreck his life. The second verse in chapter 10 says, the heart of the wise inclines to the right, but the heart of the fool to the left. I will refrain from suggesting that Solomon was making a political evaluation here. You all thought it, didn't you? But your inclination he's talking about your bent, your tendency, your leanings. Certain people are drawn in different directions to different things. Some of that's just a personality thing. We all have things that, we enjoy, we're good at, we're drawn to. But then there's a fundamental difference between somebody who is wise, somebody who's seeking after the Lord, and somebody who's not. Since the fall, we are drawn to unhealthy things, to foolish things, to things that are not good for us. And a wise person, someone who is spiritually wise, wants their orientation to be godly. See, wisdom here is a matter of the heart, not just of the intellect. I think a lot of times in our culture we think of wisdom as being smart, thinking through things. But a more biblical view of that, the heart includes all of this, and that includes not only your thought processing, but also your will, your desires. And it's all been impacted by the fall. Scripture says in Proverbs 23:7, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And in Genesis 6:5, we're told that when God brought the flood on the world, he came to that point where he was ready to wipe out the whole world because every thought and inclination of the heart of humanity was evil. So every thought and inclination, they were, all the gifts, all the intelligence, all the skill, everything, their inclination was to use it for evil. So we're drawn to the right or to the left. And in this sense, it's symbolic. The right hand, of course, is the hand of blessing, strength, favor. It's the best. It's the hand of skill. And so the wise person is drawn to that. The fool is drawn to the left. Think of Jesus talking about separating the sheep from the goats. The sheep to the right, the goats to the left, the righteous to the right, the unrighteous to the left. And so the left hand, it doesn't always, the left hand at a banquet is the second best. It doesn't mean you're being cursed. But generally speaking, if you're separating things, the right hand is the good side, the left hand is the bad side. Think about back in the old days, nothing against anybody who's left-handed. My husband's left-handed, he's brilliant, but the thought was that you had to use your right hand for many reasons. There are cultural, sanitary reasons, but most people are right-handed, so they assume if you're doing it with your left hand, you're wrong. And so, no, use your right hand. This is the skill hand. So then the left hand would represent being unskilled or choosing not the best, even just the second best, but it's not the best. But in the sense of separating the sheep from the goats, definitely it's the curse, not the blessing. And so foolish person's heart is drawn in that direction. I think of John 6:44 when Jesus says, no one can come to the Father unless no one can come to me, Jesus says, unless the Father draws him. And so it's not just you tell somebody the right way, and if you say it just right, they're going to process it right, and they're going to, accept the Lord. They have to be drawn from their heart, and the Holy Spirit has to do that. Well, what do we do about the foolish inclinations of our heart? We all have them. Even if we're regenerate, we still struggle with the old nature. Even if we love God, we are still drawn to things that aren't good, and the Scripture can inform us of what those are, but we still have a struggle there. And then verse 3 says, even as fools walk along the road, they lack sense and show everyone how stupid they are. And so this is talking, I think, primarily about the conduct of your life, the way you act. You can dress up nice, you can say the right words in certain situations, but the way you live your life is going to show who you really are, what you really value. And, there are a lot of ways in life that we show our foolishness. We sabotage our own success so often. We make life harder than it needs to be. We cut off our nose to spite our face. We get in our own way. There's all kinds of ways that foolishness can be expressed. So that's Solomon's general advice about wisdom, and now he kind of gets into some specific things that I would say are flies in the ointment of life. The first one he talks about is dealing with a difficult ruler, and difficult rulers affect our life on many levels. Think about this, he's speaking of kings and rich people. A king, of course, is the official authority. Rich people are the ones that have the social power and the economic power. You're probably working for one. So it could be your king, your boss, somebody in authority over you that can be a real fly in your ointment. The first example he gives is a ruler's anger. He says in verse 4, if a ruler's anger rises against you, do not leave your post. Calmness can lay great offenses to rest. So this is primarily, I think, a personal type offense, a personality clash, or you've done something that the person above you really is mad about. And so Solomon is giving some wise life skill advice here. He says, stay calm, don't panic. I think our tendency is when we know somebody's mad at us, we either want to run away or we want to fight back. And neither of those is a good option here. He's saying the wise person is going to stay calm in this situation. Don't quit. Don't quit your job. Don't run away. Stand your ground. So if it's an issue of morality or something that you think differently and it's important, you stand your ground, but you don't run away and hide. You face what comes. if and when it comes. Wait it out. If he fires you, then leave. But don't throw in the towel prematurely. And I think in our culture recently, and in lots of things, we see somebody in authority, they're big and scary. They might even bluff that you're in trouble if you do this or you don't do this. You have to do this. And our tendency is then to just throw up our hands and quit and feel helpless. And he says, no, wait it out. That the anger may die down, may see things differently, but you don't quit. And then, of course, don't escalate the situation. Don't lash back. Don't slander the boss. Don't start a faction. Don't join a rebellion. That's our other tendency. When we've offended somebody, then we get offended with them, and then we go around and join everybody else into our cause. And he's saying, don't do that. Keep doing your job. Show your quality by continuing to faithfully carry out your responsibilities and to do it well. Sometimes the difficulty with a ruler is it's not a personal offense. It's not something that you've done that they've taken offense at, not a personality clash or a difference of opinion. It's just bad government. And Solomon says that this evil he's seen under the sun is the sort of error that arises from a ruler. So somebody who is in that position of authority has made some very unwise choices or policies, and that affects you. And what he points out is he says, fools are put in many high positions, while the rich occupy low ones. I've seen slaves on horseback and princes go on foot like slaves. So don't think of this in the New Testament sense of God honoring the humble. That's not what Solomon is getting at here. He's saying fools put in high positions, people who are unqualified. They're put there maybe because the person in charge owes them a favor or they happen to be friends or whatever. They're not put there because they deserve to be there. The rich occupying low ones. Now again, think of rich in the sense, not of the snobby people who think they're better than everybody, but rich in the sense of these people have managed their life well. They have the skills. And no, that the skills are not being honored. It's, the slave who, at least the mentality of a slave, somebody who is not worthy of that position that's put there. And then the princes go on foot. The people who are worthy, who are qualified, they're not honored. We see a lot of that in the world. It always has been. We're seeing it a lot in our culture right now. Unqualified people, somebody who's appointed or promoted that doesn't deserve to be there. Not based on qualifications, not based on character, based on some other reason, and they do a lot of harm in that position. Or they're dishonorable people. Maybe they have skills, but they're personally immoral, and they promote the wrong values in society. And we see that right now too. It's like the good things are not honored. It's like everything has been flipped on its head entirely. So everything that is base and vile and horrible is being put up as this is wonderful, and everything that is good and should be honored is, put down as despicable. And that's really hard to live in this situation when you have a bad government that's promoting bad values and unqualified people are ruling it. Scripture says, when the wicked come to power, the righteous go into hiding, but when the wicked die, everybody rejoices. Well, there will always be problems with human governments because there's a problem with every human heart. And sometimes I think the righteous, good citizens, peace-loving people, we kind of have a disadvantage because we are not staying up at night plotting how to take over the world and make other people miserable. We just want to do our job and be left alone. But there actually are people that stay up at night plotting how to take over the world. On the large scale, you have your Hitler, your Stalin, your, Mao, all these people who are, there have always been people like that trying to take over the world, willing to do anything to do it. And then, on a personal, petty level, just people that, their own ego is so big that they will stomp on anybody else just to feel good about themselves or maintain their power. It's hard to deal with. But there will always be problems in human governments because there's a problem with the human heart. And sometimes these problems need to be addressed. But Solomon here, I think in the next part, is saying, don't be too hasty about this. Change is fraught with perils. Before you jump jump on the cause of somebody else's bandwagon, you better be sure it's worth the effort and the risk. So I think that's how we read the next chunk of verses 8 through 11. Whoever digs, think of this in terms of social change now. If you're going to work for change, you've been so ticked off by these incompetent rulers, okay, but let's think this through. Let's think about, is it worth it? And think about, how do we do this in a way that's not going to harm us more? Whoever digs a pit may fall into it. Whoever breaks through a wall may be bitten by a snake. Whoever quarries stones may be injured by them. Whoever splits logs may be endangered by them. If the axe is dull and its edge unsharpened, more strength is needed, but skill will bring success. If a snake bites before it's charmed, the charmer receives no fee. This, on the one hand, the way I've always read this before is just a series of pictures of ironic justice. You're doing one thing that, probably is bad. You're trying to trap one person, and you end up falling into it yourself. And it certainly can be read on that level. But I think it makes specific sense in the context of this passage, looking at it as a social thing, dealing with authority kind of thing. So the first one he mentions is digging a pit. Now, this, think about, in the old days, hunting a big and dangerous animal, something fierce, that you can't just go out and whack on the head with a club or shoot with an arrow. This is a big animal that's really dangerous. So you dig a pit, and then you cover over the top of the pit with a flimsy covering that it doesn't look like there's a pit underneath, and then you lure that animal across the pit, and it falls through, and then you got it, and you can kill it. So the problem is you can forget where that pit is or end up being injured by that yourself. So think of a ruler or a boss as the large, dangerous animal. And the trouble with trying to get rid of that person in authority is, as you get swept into that scheme, you might be the one that ends up getting trapped and causing problems for yourself. Think about Daniel in the lion's den. Remember that story? The other leaders set a trap for him because they were jealous of him. So they got the king to sign this new law that says nobody's allowed to pray to anybody except the king for 30 days. And they did it specifically because they knew Daniel will not comply with this. The reason he's good, everything about him, the core of his being, is his relationship to God, and he's not going to buy this. So they tricked the king into laying this trap for Daniel. And then God, of course, rescues Daniel in the lion's den. And then, this part doesn't get told in the baby Bible too often, but the people that were plotting against him, the king realizes what they were doing, and he throws them and their whole family into that, and the lions eat them up, So there was no doubt that the lions were hungry. God spared Daniel from hungry lions, but these people end up being the ones that they laid the trap, but they're the ones who are trapped by it. So that's always a danger. Then he mentions breaking through a wall. Whoever breaks through a wall may be bitten by a snake. And I think the way to see this is you're violating a boundary. You're going into a protected place that is not your right to be there. It doesn't belong to you. And the way you're going in is inappropriate. You're not going through the door. You're going in through the wall. So maybe to steal something or to attack the person inside. Or maybe just you think it shouldn't be this way. You're going to, rip out a hole here and put a door instead, whatever. In the process of doing that, a snake bites you because the snake's hiding in there. So he's saying, be careful. There are dangers here that you're not aware of. So being bitten by a snake in this case is kind of like you want to do some remodeling and you're banging around and you knock down a wasp nest. They come after you and sting you. Quarrying stones. Whoever quarries stones may be injured by them. And there's a little disagreement about what this means, but it seems that it's a picture of moving stones, pulling them up or tearing them down, removing a wall, remaking a structure. You're rearranging things, and it's a hard work. So think of it in terms of taking down a government or an institution now. Be careful, because in the process of demolishing what is there, in that government or that institution, you can very easily hurt yourself. Demolition is a dangerous business, and it should not be undertaken without due consideration and safety measures put in place. So I think back again to the United States Revolutionary War, how careful the Founding Fathers were, how long it took to get them to that place, and how they had thought through every nuance and angle. And they wrote about the possibility of lawlessness coming from this, of people that just don't respect authority. And they said, no, that is not what we want. We need to make sure that's not where we end up. So they were very careful about it. And so that's the type of wisdom, I think, that's being called for here. Be careful when you're ripping something down. You could be hurt by it. You could make a bigger mess than what you had before. And then there's the rebuilding. It's easy to tear something down, but what are you going to replace it with? It's easy to criticize. It's easy to see the problems and then just get mad and go knock everything down. But having to build something better is way harder. And I think we see the lack of wisdom in a lot of what's gone on in our culture recently, with people being fueled by resentment and bitterness. In many cases, there was originally an offense, but people that want to change our culture take that and exploit it and fan it into flame and enrage people to the point where they just want to go rip everything down. And that's not wise, because then what? You know, the people behind us just want chaos. They want the destruction of the nation. They want to be able to come in and do what they want. But in the meantime, they're ruining everything, ruining a lot of lives. And nobody has thought through. The little pawns that are being manipulated have not thought through what's the alternative. What's going to replace this? It's just like, I'm mad and I'm going to rip everything down. Very dangerous. Splitting logs is kind of an extension of this. So I think of that in terms of using force and violence to divide things up. Whoever splits logs may be endangered by them. That's a dangerous profession, splitting logs. You know, you can, as you're swinging, the axe head could fly off and hit you or someone else. The tree could fall on you. Any number of things could happen. It's hard work. It's dangerous work. So again, this could be seen as breaking down a government or an institution, dividing it, chopping it up, and that you could be hurt in the process. Then he says in verse 10, if the axe is dull and its edge unsharpened, more strength is needed, but skill will bring success. So, in a sense, you can draw a general principle here, work smarter, not harder. But it's important to think through what you're trying to do. Here's the job. Okay, make sure you have the tools. Make sure you have the skills. Make sure you have the material you need to make this happen and to do it in the best way, the least dangerous way. So do your safety checks first. Make sure your tools are in order. So think again of revolution or, maybe on a much smaller scale, even in the place you work or in your church, you want some things changed. And the tendency is, in the heat of the moment, you just take out your big old axe and start hacking at things. And you have to use a lot more force that way. And it's not as effective that way. But if you have sharpened your blade and you've thought through this, you know how to hit, where to hit, and to do it with the least amount of damage. So you can look at using a dull axe head as using force and violence instead of using skill and diplomacy. And then charming a snake kind of follows up on this. If a snake bites before it's charmed, the charmer receives no fee. So think of that snake, that angry snake, poisonous, that can really harm you, as an angry ruler. Somebody in authority that could really cause you harm. And the picture is, don't get into a hissing contest. Be careful how you approach this. You can be all bluster and fight back and whatever, but you're the one that's going to be damaged by that. They have the authority. They are in the position where they could do you a lot of harm. So the idea is, charm them, don't enrage them, don't insult them, don't do things that are going to escalate the situation. Think of Queen Esther dealing with King Ahasuerus, where she comes in to make her request. There's a horrible thing going on that she wants stopped, and she doesn't come in and start nagging him. She doesn't come in and start accusing him. She charms him. And she gets his heart to incline towards her, and then she can make her request, and then it's effective, and there's not a lot of other collateral damage. So I think that's the picture that Solomon's getting at with all those different examples. Okay, so the next fly in the ointment, you might say, is having to endure the fools of the world. And he talks about this in two ways: a fool's talk and a fool's work. Words of the mouth of the wise are gracious, but fools are consumed by their own lips. At the beginning, their words are folly. At the end, they are wicked madness, and fools multiply words. No one knows what is coming. Who can tell someone else what will happen after them? Now, we all struggle with controlling our tongue, with our words, saying stupid, dumb things. So this is really convicting. But it's something that Solomon is looking at from all his experience in life and saying, this is something we need to pay attention to. This is a really important wisdom principle. This is very important life skill. If you want to do well in life, you need to be able to speak well. So a fool's talk, he points out some things that are wrong with it. First of all, it goes from bad to worse. You see it progressing from simple folly in the beginning to wicked madness at the end. And so, folly, foolishness, what's that? Starts out kind of simple folly, is silly, inane, stupid, unwise, indiscreet, lacking good judgment. And you can tell that right away when a fool starts talking. But the idea is the longer he talks, the more trouble he gets himself into. And it becomes wicked then. Not just silly and stupid, but wicked. So think of being profane, irreverent, blasphemous, immoral, vulgar, depraved, malicious, wanting to hurt with that. And then mad, wicked madness, that's extreme foolishness, wild, preposterous, reckless, stupid, crazy. So you've heard people use expressions like, you must be mad, to say something like that. You must be crazy. That's crazy talk. Stop that. Fools incite themselves and each other into greater folly. The longer they talk, the worse it gets, and their own words lead them and other fools in a bad direction. James says in the New Testament, he writes a lot about this, taming the tongue. He says, "Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell." And he says, no man can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. So it gets you into trouble. And the more you talk in a certain direction, the more consequences come from that. The more you get incited, other people get incited, and it heads in a really bad way that's going to end up injuring you. And the second thing is fools just talk too much. Solomon has said this before. So think about many words, little substance, when he says they multiply words. They talk too much and they say too little, and they take way too long to say it. So think of it, we've all met people like this, that their method of communication is tedious monologue. They just go on and on and on. And they speak very adamantly about things that they don't understand. And there's a lot of words and very little substance. They like to hear themselves speak, but it's boring and annoying to the people that are cursed and have to listen to them. So he's like, don't be that way. And then there's the inappropriate conversation aspect of talking too much. You've heard the expression TMI, too much information. Sometimes it's not that they're saying too little, it's that, well, they're using a lot of words to say little, but it's that they're revealing too much. They're talking too much. They talk about things they shouldn't be talking about. They reveal things they shouldn't reveal. Things that are not appropriate in a particular situation with certain people. Indecent things, lurid things, scandalous things. Back in the former days of our society, there was more of a sense of what's appropriate in given situations and with given people. So, if guys started mouthing off or heading in a unsavory direction in the conversation, one of the other men would say, hey, there are ladies present. And that would shut them up, because it's, no, you don't talk that way in this situation with these people. That, locker room is one thing, there's ladies present here. Think of people talking and a mom, says, shh, not in front of the children. It'll scare them, or they don't need to be exposed to this just yet. There's children present, not appropriate right now. Or maybe it's just gossip, slander, talking about things that are none of your business. So that's all included in the multiplying words, talking too much. And then we see when he goes on to say, nobody knows what's coming next, I think what he's implying is that this person that's talking too much, this foolish person, is boasting. They're boasting about themselves and their future and their prospects and what they're going to do in life. And we see that, they think too highly of themselves. They give themselves too much credit. They're talking a lot about what they intend to do, but they don't follow through on those good intentions. They're counting their pay before they even start the job. James again says, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Now listen, you who say today or tomorrow, we will go to this or that city and spend a year there and carry on business and make money. He says, why? You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. You ought to say, if it's the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast and brag. All such boasting is evil. So I think that's the part here when he says, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But here's this foolish person talking about, I'm going to do this and that, and I'm going to be rich, and I'm going to be famous, and I'm going to do all these things, and they don't have the backup for that. They don't follow through. I think we've all been aggravated at times when somebody says, oh, I'll do that, they say it, and then they don't do it. And they say it so many times, you finally get to the point where you're like, just do it. Don't tell me you're going to do it. You get my hopes up. Just do it or don't do it. Yoda, Master Yoda, do or do not. Just quit talking about it. And then there's this whole concept in here of these fools are consumed by their own lips. That's kind of a creepy picture. It's a worse picture than sticking your foot in your mouth. Putting your foot in your mouth, you're tripping yourself up, you're embarrassing yourself. But consuming yourself with your own lips is, okay, you stuck your foot in your mouth, and now you bite it off and chew it up and swallow it. You eat it. So you're killing yourself. You're diminishing yourself as you continue to talk this way. You're harming and destroying yourself. That's the way a fool talks. So fool's mouth gets him into trouble, and then his work doesn't benefit him very much because, first of all, there's a lot of talk and very little work. The toil of fools wearies them. They don't know the way to town. And I think this phrase, they don't know the way to town, is probably an idiom of the time. It's an expression that means they don't know anything. They don't know how to implement this great idea they have. They talk a lot, they don't do anything, and it's wearisome, it's drudgery to them because the work that they do is not productive, and it's probably not skilled work. They probably haven't taken the time to learn to do it well, studied it. They just have this great idea, and they blather on about it, and the little bit that they do is not successful. So it's wearisome to them and everybody else. Solomon is showing us the kind of person that we don't want to be. Here is Bob. Bob is annoying, braggy. He's a boastful loser. He talks and takes no action. He talks too much, says too little, takes way too long to do it. Don't be Bob. Don't be the fly in somebody else's ointment. People like this are definitely one of those irritations in life that anybody who has the misfortune of spending a long time around them feels very annoyed and aggravated and tired by. Then the last part of this little section, Solomon kind of goes back to the leadership idea, and he talks about the power of leadership, the influence of leadership. And first of all, he points that out by the character of the leaders when he says in verse 16, woe to the land whose king was a servant, some of your versions say a child, and whose princes feast in the morning. What does that mean? It's very cryptic, but I think what it's getting at, when you talk about the king being a servant or a child, again, this is not the New Testament honorable way of serving your people. We're talking about somebody who's unqualified, somebody who's not trained. He doesn't have the skill or the wisdom. And in the sense of a child, or could be a slave too, easily influenced by other people because they don't know what they're doing. They don't have the confidence. They don't have the skills that they need. They don't have the knowledge of the world that they need. So woe to the land whose top ruler, whose king, is unqualified. And then whose princes feast in the morning. And here I think what we see is that they're self-indulgent and undisciplined, and they're not responsible. So they enjoy the benefits of their position, but they don't take the responsibilities that go with that seriously. They're not focused on caring for the kingdom. They're using the kingdom to indulge their own appetites. They're extravagant, addicted to pleasure. They're rewarding themselves as if they've done a good day's work, but they're feasting in the morning. They haven't done anything yet. So they wake up and their thought is, oh, how do I make myself happy? How do I, indulge this position? And he says, woe to the land whose princes are like that. So that's the bad leaders. The good leaders in verse 17, blessed is the land whose king is of noble birth and whose princes eat at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. So again, I think we can get wrapped up and misunderstand this in our modern Western American, everybody's equal mindset, and I want you to just kind of set that aside for a minute because that's not where this is what Solomon's trying to say. When he says the king is of noble birth, yes, that was, you had bloodlines and classism and all that. But I think the principle here is that this person is qualified. They were raised with this in mind. They were educated. They were mentored. They were trained. They know how to conduct themselves in that role. So he says noble birth. I think we would think more noble character, noble in the sense of being ready for this position. And then princes eating at the proper time. So these princes, these counselors to the king, these people that rule under him, they are self-disciplined and they're responsible and they take their job seriously. They're not abusing their privileges. When they wake up in the morning, they have a list of things to do, and they're going to get them done, and they might skip lunch doing them. They wait till the end of the day when they've actually accomplished something, and then they can relax and feast. That's the appropriate time. Then he talks about the responsibility of leaders, I think is what's going on here. Again, you could take these next little verses and take them just as, general little nuggets for living your life, and they can be taken that way. But I think in the context, he's continuing to talk about leadership. He says in verse 18, through laziness, the rafters sag, because of idle hands, the house leaks. So certainly we can take this on a personal level. Everybody can benefit from this. Stay on top of your stuff. Do things. Manage your life well. Manage your property well. Good. But in the sense of a leader, you have even more responsibility for this. You want to be a good manager. You want to be attentive to the upkeep and maintenance of the kingdom, of the organization, of the church, of the family, of whatever it is you're in charge of. Pay attention. Where is it weak? Where does it need to be built up? What's broken and needs to be fixed? What needs to be updated, modernized, whatever? You don't just neglect it, think it's going to take care of itself. It won't. Don't just leave it for the next person that comes into the position. You do your job well while you have that job. Keep up to date. Be diligent, attentive, responsible. And then the next one, verse 19, a feast is made for laughter, wine makes life merry, and money is the answer for everything. What? Okay, but if you think about it again in the train of thought that we've been following, you might think of it this way. Parties are nice, but make sure you can pay the bills. Make sure that you can pay for that food and that wine without bankrupting the kingdom. So, yeah, parties are good. You need fun. You need laughter, have a good time. But manage your life or your kingdom in such a way that you can do that and not bankrupt everything else. So that's, some of the duties then of leaders he's been talking about. Well, we have a lot of leaders that are not diligent in their management, and they're not financially responsible. They have put off dealing with the issues for way down the road, whoever comes next. They're living high on the hog now. They've indebted how many generations of future grandchildren to pay for their parties. So what do we do with that? And I think that's where verse 20 comes in. It deals with our attitude toward leaders now. Solomon says, do not revile the king even in your thoughts, or curse the rich in your bedroom, because a bird in the sky may carry your words, and a bird on the wing may report what you say. Think of that little saying, a little bird told me. There are a lot of little birds around. So he's saying, first of all, be careful what you say. Someone else is going to hear it, and they're going to report it. And, be practical here. In America, again, the consequences we have generally faced for saying something unwise about somebody is they get their feelings hurt. We look bad. It damages the friendship, whatever. There's a little flap. But in a lot of cultures, a lot of places, and increasingly in our own culture, you say something bad about the wrong person, and there are dire consequences. This person has authority, and they have the power to get back at you. And so he's saying, be careful. Don't go mouthing off. Somebody will hear you say this. Think of Jesus saying in Luke 12:3, therefore, what you have said in the dark shall be heard in the light, and what you've whispered in private rooms shall be proclaimed on the housetops. That tends to be true in this life. It will come back on you, but even more so with eternal judgment in mind. So be careful what you say. And secondly, we can infer from this, be careful who's listening. Even in your bedroom, don't curse the rich, he's saying. So the idea here is, in our own space, we tend to let down our guard and we mouth off and we say things we wouldn't say in front of other people. But he says, even there, where you think you're safe and there are no enemies to overhear you, okay, every family at some point, depending on how extended, has somebody in it that's not on your side. And then what about the servants in the house? They're overhearing what's going on. And if you've offended them, they're going to go and tell on you. Remember when Martha Stewart got put in jail for insider trading? How many people in her situation do insider trading? Probably a lot. I think what happened is she was just nasty. And she ticked off somebody that worked for her to the point where they went, and I'm going to get back. And they told what she was doing, and then, of course, she gets thrown in prison. So be careful. Be careful, even in your own little home, in your own sphere of influence, what you're saying, because it will be overheard. And what about the kids? Kids, oh my goodness, kids are notorious. If you've ever taught Sunday school, the things the kids say about their parents, they don't know they're saying something wrong. They just blather off whatever they hear, and it can be really funny and it can be really embarrassing. I won't say who this was in the church here, and it happened many years ago, but a guy, I met him in the hallway, one of the dads, and he was all red-faced, and he was just laughing. He said, I'm going to have to change churches. He was going to have a colonoscopy done, and he had tried to describe to his child what that meant. And so when it came prayer request time for the little kiddies, little kid says, my dad's going to have this done. The guy's just dying. So, they don't know they're saying anything wrong, but they hear what you say, and it could be repeated. And then, what about even, the talking parent that just, says what it hears? You don't know what you say will be heard. And then think of what the Psalm says, 139:4, even before a word is on my tongue, Lord, you know it completely. So it's not just a matter of the words that we finally articulate. God knows what's behind them. He knows what we're going to say before we say it. So it comes down to watch your thoughts. Watch your attitude. Don't revile the king, even in your thoughts. Now, you're going to be careful here. I'm not saying we should all be little Pollyannas that just think the best about everybody and never have any negative feelings. No, that's not realistic. That's not wise. I think the point here is it all starts in your heart. Whatever's going to get you in trouble starts in here. And out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so we've all had experiences like, oops, did I actually say that? We say it because we've been saying it internally, and then it just kind of slips out. So if we've been rehearsing it in our mind incessantly, it will slip out the mouth at some point. So we need to watch our thoughts and our attitudes, because that's where all the trouble begins. Now, he doesn't say don't have any negative thoughts, but he says don't revile, don't curse them in your thoughts. And I think that, think about, to revile means to speak abusively, railing against somebody, lambasting them, insulting them, and cursing somebody, calling for their harm. We have a tendency when we have a grievance and we feel like we don't have power to have it addressed, that we just keep replaying it in our mind, and we get angrier and angrier, and we start having imaginary conversations in our head and rehearsing all the ways, what the things we would like to say, but we're not going to say, or we don't have the right to say, would get us in trouble, but we're saying them in our head, and we're thinking of all the things we want to tell other people about it, and it grows and it grows, and it takes on a life of its own, and then it will pop out your mouth, and it will get you in trouble. So I think of the wisdom of Paul talking to the church about how to deal with offenses in the church. You go through the proper channels, you deal with it. And even in the Old Testament, Moses is telling the children of Israel, if your neighbor offends you, confront them with it. Tell it to their face. Don't hate them in your heart. You go deal with it the right way. So Paul says in the church, if you see somebody in sin, somebody's offended you, they've hurt you, you go through the proper channels. You go to them first and try to deal with it. If that doesn't work, then you bring in a mediator, a trusted friend. If that doesn't work, you take it up the channel and deal with it the right way. It's kind of like in the beginning where he was talking about ripping down walls and chopping logs. Do it wisely, do it safely. Don't just go running in there and mucking it up worse. So, Solomon has just been giving practical, this world advice down here under the sun. He's talked about the value of wisdom in the last lesson. He emphasizes it throughout, and here he's giving some examples. These are some flies in the ointment, that this is how wisdom would deal with those things. I'm going to read a few scriptures here, Josh, and then I'm going to have you play the song. I want to think of it this way. We need more than anger management. We need more than skills of biting our tongue or of hiding what's inside us. What it comes down to is we need a radical transformation of our hearts. We need a reorientation of our being. We need to be drawn to the right things. So think about this. Psalm 51:6 says, you delight in truth in the inward being, and you teach me wisdom in the secret place. David says in Psalm 139, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there's any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. So here he is. Again, you can look at God as the judge. I better hide my thoughts from God. Well, you can't. You can have him as your judge, or you can have him as your father and your teacher. And that's what David's saying. Here, check out my heart. What's wrong in here? And then he says, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Think of James saying, if any of you lack wisdom, ask God, who gives generously to anyone who asks, and he doesn't find fault with you for not already having it. Ask, and he will give it to you. He will teach you. So we need more than just these skills. We need God to work in our heart, to incline our hearts to the right thing. And that's what this song is about. It's I didn't write out the words because it's very repetitive. All it says is, draw me, Lord, and I will run after you. And I want that to be our prayer as we consider life skills and wisdom and what it is that we really need.
Someone had unplugged it, so just a moment.
This is Selah, by the way. Draw me, Lord. Lord God, you have drawn us to yourself. You've revealed yourself to us. You've given us your word. You've shown us what's good. You've taught us many lessons. But we need you to continue to draw us. Please show us your beauty. Capture our imaginations with your worth, so that the foolish things that we tend to be drawn to when we're not looking at you will fall away. We want to pursue you, follow after you, but we get tugged in many directions. We look at lesser things and forget about you. Our hearts malfunction on us, and in trying to satisfy that deep need we have, we end up causing damage to ourselves and others. But Lord, purify our thoughts, our imaginations, and reorient our whole being, Lord, to seek you, to know our purpose in life, which is to glorify you and enjoy you forever, Lord. Make us capable of enjoying you. Show us your beauty so that we can love you more. Give us grace and teach us, Lord. Teach us in our lives and help us not to be afraid of your correction. Help us, like David, to be able to open ourselves to you, to want to be like you, to say, search me and try me. See if there's any wicked way in me. Lead me in the way everlasting. Teach me your ways. I want to follow you. Lord, make that our prayer. Make that reality in our lives. And help us to be gracious to other people when they're the flies in our ointment, knowing that they're human just like we are, and we are probably flies in someone else's ointment. So help us to be less fly-like and, Lord, to reflect you more.